Hey, it's Yazki Wolf, and welcome to our next devlog for the Arena tile-based combat game that we've been working on. And I don't know if I mentioned in the last video, but I had recorded the most of the development up to this point. I've gotten a lot more done than I've shown in the videos. Unfortunately, the recordings had some audio issues that I tried to salvage, but unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to be salvageable. So I'm going to just I'm gonna go over the different elements that I put into the game and just kind of rehash it in new videos. And so for today, you'll see that when I hit play, we have a lot more stuff going on here in the game than we've actually covered in our videos. You'll see that we have enemies like spawning randomly throughout the stage. And let me just zoom in a little bit for that for you. Let's zoom back out a little bit. Okay, so you see we have enemies spawned into the stage. My character moves, and after he expends a certain amount of action points, it then shifts to the enemy phase, and then the enemies all move. And the way the movement's being handled, it's just as it was in the last video. We have a player input that then is sent to the movement script and tells the player to move. And we made the movement script general enough that we can use the same script on both the player and on the enemies. So they're both using the same script. They're just getting a different input. So essentially what I did is I took the actual player input, I took it out of the movement script, and I made a player input script. And that script sends the input to the mover script. And then the difference between that and the enemies is the enemies, instead of receiving their input from the player input script, they receive their input from an enemy AI script. And now that was a whole bag of worms that spent a lot of time on, so that's going to have to be a whole nother video. So we're not going to cover that yet. But for now, you'll see that we have turns working, we have the enemies moving and chasing after my character, and if I press F, which will turn it into an attack mode, I can then press a direction and I can attack and kill the enemies. And the enemies in turn can also come and attack me, and you'll see the little flash when I take damage. So let's just take a step back, and since in the first video we covered movement, in this video we're going to talk about attack and how to get these characters attacking and taking damage and so forth. So to summarize the system that we implemented in the first video, we're using the number keypad. And I also have a checkbox that we'll probably put in the settings menu later that you could use WASD as well. But for now, we're using the number keypad to handle movement. And so you'll have in the number keypad, we have a 7, 8, 9, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. And 5 acts as like a pass button, so that means that you do no movement that turn, and you just waits for the next turn. And then all the other ones just kind of tell it to either move up and to the right, up and to the left, up and to the right, right, down and to the right, down to the left, and left. And that's translated by just having a simple XY coordinate, and up value is a positive Y, down would be a negative Y, right is a positive X, left is a negative X, and if you want to do a combination of the two, like up and to the right, then you just have a positive, Y and a positive X would bring you this direction. And if you did the opposite and you had a negative Y and a negative X, it brings you this direction, and then you just kind of do different combinations depending on what you want. And that's how we handled the movement. So essentially what's happening is you have these keys, which is an input that the player is inputting into the game, and I'm having my player input script listen for that input. Once that is received, it then goes ahead and it sends it to the mover script, which actually picks up our character and moves them into their new position. Right? Pretty self-explanatory. And as I just mentioned earlier, and we'll go into this later when I actually go into the enemy AI script, but for the enemy units, we have an enemy AI script, which is basically doing the same thing as the player input script, but instead of it being the player pressing a key, the enemy AI is looking at what behavior we want to have for that particular unit, and then it's looking at the situation and it's deciding, okay, in this situation, I want to move to the player. And so it's going to do a calculation. It's going to figure out that the player is, say, in the down direction. So then it then says, okay, we want the input down to be sent to the mover script of the enemy. And so the enemy does the same thing. He gets the mover script. And so after that, it's the same as the player. The enemy just is moved by its mover script. But to keep things simple, we're just going to focus on the player for right now. And so we have essentially 3 different actions that we want to implement. The first was the movement, but now we also want to have attack. So we're going to have an attacker script as well. And this is going to be a melee attack, so it's just one space away from you. And we're also going to have a ranged attack, which should be another script. And so what I did is I just put one kind of separator here in between this input and the scripts, and I made a script called the actor script. And that's just because it's the script that's attached to every acting component of the game. So whether it's the player, whether it's the enemy, whatever it is, and let's just change this to input because it doesn't really matter if it's the player or if it's the enemy. It's the same basic flow of logic. The actor script then looks at that input and decides, is this input for movement? Is this input for attacking? Or is this input for a ranged attack? And we're doing it this way because we're modeling our game off of kind of the old school rogue-like games. And I don't mean rogue-like as in like permadeath, like modern like rogue-like games. I mean like really old school rogue-like games where you have like ASCII like characters that you're moving around on a black and white screen. So in modern games, usually you press your direction and then you press an attack button. Let's just say A for attack right now. And then you'll get an attack that goes in that direction. In those old school games, it was kind of the opposite of that. So instead of doing the direction and then if you hit the attack button, we're going to hit the attack button, and that's going to change you into attack mode. And so if you hit the direction after that, it will attack in that direction. Does that make sense? Essentially, to make it a little simpler, before, with this input up here, with this input area here, we were just sending an XY coordinate, right? So we had an X coordinate and a Y coordinate that was sent to the mover, and then the mover knew to move in that direction X and Y, right? In the new XY coordinate. Now we're adding one more to that. So in addition to the X and Y coordinates, we're also going to be sending an attack, I think it was attack value or attack, I think it's attack type. And so it's just going to be a numerical value from 0 to 3, 0 to 2 actually. 0 means that there is no attack, so that means that it will just be moving because there's no attack. If the attack type is 1, however, then the actor is going to send it to the attacker script because 1 is a melee attack. And if it's 2, then the actor is going to send it to the ranged attack because that's going to be a ranged attack. Attack type 2 is going to be ranged. And I'll show you that to you in the script real quick right now. Once again, I don't want to go too in depth into the script itself. It's because I'm trying to keep this as accessible as possible. But in the future, I may make a series of videos explaining C# and whatnot in the future. But anyways, for now, you see here we have a player input script, and this is, and inside the player input script we have these numpad controls. This is just what I was saying earlier, where you press the key on the number pad. And you'll see here, just like in the last video, we have an input, get key down, key code is keypad 8. So if you press 8 on the number pad, that goes up. If you press 2 on the number pad, that goes down. If you press 6 on the number pad, it goes right. And then you have left, right up, right down, left up, left down, pass turn. So 5 is 0, so nothing. It just does pass as your turn. But as you'll see here, also, we've added this third value here. So in the last video, we had the 0 and the 0.5 for the X, and Y. But now we're also adding the attack type. And after we're setting that to the player actor, and it's going to be accessing a function called execute action. That's just the function that I put there to assess what this information means over in the actor. And then after that's been sent, then we reset it to 0, so that 0, i.e. movement, is your default state. So if you don't press anything, you'll move. But if you press a key to switch your mode, let's see, where is attack type being accessed? There you go. Yeah. So if you pressed F, and this is the same type of code, it's just doing a different function. So now input get key down, key go to F. If you press F, the attack type is set to 1. If you press R, it's set to 2. I hope that makes sense so far. And so then nothing is sent to the actor at this point. It's just telling it what type it is, which is then sent once you press the actual direction. And so when you press the actual direction, then it accesses the player actor. And if we go over to the player actor, we'll see that, so in the actor script, we have this execute action where it takes the horizontal, the vertical, and the attack type. And first thing it does is it checks to see to make sure that we're not dead. If we're dead, we don't want to be taking any input. So if we're dead, it just returns. But if it's not dead, we could go ahead and say, look at the attack type. We set that up. So essentially what it means is that we have a switch where it looks at these 3 different cases. If it's determined that it's just a move, then we access the mover script, and the mover script loads its action, which is a movement. If it's an attacker, then if it's an attack, then it accesses the attacker script. And if it's ranged, it accesses the range script, and it just sends it the horizontal and vertical, so it knows what direction are you going to be attacking in, what direction are you going to be releasing your ranged attack in, or what direction are you going to be moving in. And that's pretty much all there is to it. So just breaking it down one more time, you see here we have our input, and the player also has the choice to press, if he presses nothing, then the attack type is 0. We'll say AT for attack type. But if he presses F, which is the button that we're using for the attack, then it goes into attack mode, so the attack type turns into 1. And if he presses R, then it turns into 2. And then once he presses an input, whether it be 7, 8, 9, or any of these number keys, whatever that is, then the attack type that was established over here, along with the input, which is established here, is sent over to the actor, and then sends those coordinates either to the mover, the attacker, or the ranged. Is it a ranged? I forgot what I actually called the... ranged attacker. So ranged attacker is what I actually called the script. And if you look here at the player, you'll see all that information here. You'll see that in the description, in the information for the player, we have the actor script. And another reason why I kind of separated these is because I wanted the actor script to be where like stats are held, so like the character's strength, his dexterity, and health. So we have the mover, we have the attacker, and we have the ranged attacker. And also you'll see our sneak peek, we also have leveling in the game, so that's be the next thing to talk about. All right, so now the next thing is, how do we actually attack? So now that we know that the input is being sent to attack in X direction, and whatever the direction is, whether it be up, down, left, right, or a combination of the two, how do we actually handle attacking? So when we move, we just take our character and say if the input was to move right, we just move right. Ta-dong, we're done. So for attack, it's really not that different because we have our target location that we want something to occur in, but in this case, instead of moving our character, what we're going to do is we're going to spawn a little hitbox in that area. And the hitbox is going to look to see if there is anything to be hit. And now this does mean that we have to add one more thing, and that is to all actors, including the player, we now have to also add like a hit collider. So if we have this character attacks, he causes his little hitbox to spawn in the area that he's attacking. And if no one is there, nothing happens. But if we have another actor and the actor goes into that box or happens to be in that box, and his hit collider collides with that collides or overlaps with that hitbox, well then now we know that he's receiving damage. So in this case, if the character did an attack that did say 3 damage, that 3 has to be translated to the hitbox, and then the hitbox, when it collides with someone, it sends that 3 to the target that it's colliding with, and then that target knows that it has to take away 3 damage from itself. So going back into the game, you'll see how we set this up. We have our player here, and this is his prefab. If you're not familiar with Unity terms, prefab is just sort of like a pre-packaged asset that you can reuse in the project. You can spawn it in and spawn it out at will. And so on this player, we have the sprite renderer. If we turn that on and off, you'll see that the sprite of the character disappears and reappears. We have the actor, mover, attacker, all these scripts that I mentioned earlier, and the leveling script. But we also have a rigid body 2D. And above that, we also have a circle collider. And I'm not super knowledgeable about what rigid body is. I just know that we need a rigid body 2D in order to have the collider work. I guess it's just like a physics thing for Unity. So that's not something that I coded. That's just prepackaged in Unity. You just add a component and you search for rigid body and it will be in there. So once you start using physics, like collisions and stuff like that, you need to have just a rigid body attached. So we have the rigid body 2D. And then up here we have the circle collider 2D. And the circle collider is this circle here. This green circle that's around here, that's the circle collider. So I just attached that circle collider to the player and to all actors. So you'll see here with the crab as well, he has the green circle around him as well. It's a circle collider. If I click it, it can turn on and off like so. So as long as I have that on, I have it marked as it's a trigger. Then we go to our other prefab that we set up for this, and that is, let's see here, where did I put it? Is it in prefabs, behaviors? I think it's being called from resources, so I probably have to go into the resources. Yeah, there we go, collisions. So we also have a hitbox, and so you don't really actually have to have a sprite for a hitbox. It could be completely just like if I click here, this like circle here, that's actually really all that matters. So it's not even a box. I made this a circle too, so it doesn't have to be a box. It's just the kind of the lingo for it. But so I made a sprite just so that I could see it in game if I wanted to for debugging purposes. But you really don't need a sprite. It could be completely invisible. But essentially, what's important here is that it has a circle collider on here. So we have a circle collider on the hitbox and a circle collider on the player and all the other actors. And we also have a script here called the hitbox script. And so the hitbox script will then have a function here called onTriggerEnter2D, and once again, that's just a Unity function. That's not anything specific that I came up with. It's just something that's pre-built in Unity, and it just looks to see if there's a collision or not, basically. And if there is a collision, then get component it accesses the actor script on there, and it tells the actor script that it needs to be damaged. That's pretty much all there is to it. I won't go too much into the ins and out of how I calculate the exact damage. I think that might be another video if you want that. But essentially, that's all that's happening in order to tell it that it's being damaged. And then it's the damage script, of course, is in the actor. For the damage script, it's going to have a HP pool that it takes away from there. Alright, so I think that's good enough for this video. Till next time, live boldly and be creative. Yoroshiku.